My research on, the migrant crisis, as people call it, basically revealed that it's an agreement. It's a facilitated, planned, funded agreement, and your tax dollars are being used for it.
On British Thought Leaders, investigative journalist Joshua Philipp exposes the truth about the US border crisis.
Interestingly, what I found was the same agreement that is facilitating mass migration into the United States is the same one the UK is part of, the same one Germany is part of, the same one Canada is part of.
Josh visited some of the world's most dangerous places to speak to the people involved.
It's crazy. So I went to Mexico to see this for myself. When you go to the Mexico side of the Rio Grande, you look at the ground, it's covered with discarded IDs. Driver's licenses, passports, bus tickets, airplane tickets.
Real passports.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating, covering the ground.
He uncovered a shadowy network run by the United Nations that brings migrants into the US.
But I was talking to the mayor of Chula Vista, and he was saying, I asked him, well, what's happening? What are the NGOs running this? And he's like, they don't tell me. I'm like, you're the mayor, they don't tell you? He's like, no, they don't tell me. Really? And I'm like, well, where do they take him to? He goes, they don't tell me. Who are the groups running this? They don't tell me. All he's told is deal with it.
Welcome to British Thought Leaders. I'm Lee Hall. Today I'm delighted to be in New York in the Crossroads studio with host Josh Philipp, who is senior investigative reporter at the Epoch Times. Josh, thanks for welcoming us.
Hey, real pleasure. Good to have you in the US for a bit.
Thank you. I wanted to dive straight into the big issues with you. In the UK, they don't come much bigger than illegal immigration.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you've been battling with this here. You've been reporting on this in depth. You've been down at the border. Can you talk us through, what's happened so far and what the situation currently is?
So I've been investigating, in the US we call it the border crisis, or at least, on the conservative side, that's how they refer to it. And what I wanted to find out was what's actually running it. So I've been down in Mexico. I actually traveled all the way down to Panama. Me and my team, we went to the Darién Gap, which is,
dangerous.
Oh man, one of the most dangerous places on earth. If you understand, the Pan American Highway runs all the way from the tip of Alaska all the way down the tip of, the southern tip of, South America. The only place it does not connect is the Darién Gap.
Right.
And if you understand too, they could build the Panama Canal. They could not build a road through the Darién Gap. Incredibly dangerous area. But so this is basically how I did my research. It was in two stages. The first time I went down to the US-Mexico border, I was interviewing sheriffs and government officials, and I was saying, okay, what's actually happening with the border crisis? What's really going on? I can tell you my original thesis, right? What I thought I was going to find. I thought I was going to go there and I was going to find the cartels are basically running the border crisis because, the Mexican cartels, they do human trafficking. On the Mexico side, when people want to cross the border, they have to pay the cartels.
Right.
It's like you have to pay them for passage. If you don't, they'll kill you. I have friends who are Mexican journalists. One of my good friends, in fact, he sends me stuff sometimes. They've been finding mass graves on the Mexico side of the border. When people refuse to pay the cartels, they just kill them. It's horrible stuff. So when I was down there, that's what I thought I was going to find. Okay, cartels are running the whole show. And what I was told was very different. So I was down in Kinney County, which is it's at Eagle Pass. It's one of the big choke points. Real bad cartel area. You have even gunfire at night coming across from Mexico, wow. Sometimes even into the, cross border into the United States. Terrible stuff. But they have a big problem, of course. It's one of the choke points. A lot of people come through illegally there. So I was interviewing the sheriff, and I was like, well, what happens? What are you dealing with? They only have they have a sheriff and a handful of deputies. And the entire focus of the police department, they have multiple high-speed chases every single day with human traffickers. And it's terrible because it's a small town. They have to put the school on lockdown every time because, you don't want kids getting run over by, people in high-speed chases. A lot of it's ranches, so people, of course, have their cattle, and they have a lot of like specialized game there. People can go pay to hunt. A lot of times the illegal immigrants, they'll go and they'll cut the fences. Because of regulations, the ranchers have to replace the entire fence. And this is costing the ranchers like literally thousands of dollars every day.
Wow.
And they're going, or every week I should say, and they're going out of business. So it's really impacting the local neighborhood. So I asked the sheriff, I'm like, well, what happens when you catch these people? And he goes, oh, when we catch them, we have to hand them over to these NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and they run these buses. And I'm like, well, who are the NGOs? And he goes, well, they don't tell me. I'm like, well, who tells you have to hand them over to them? Well, it's the authorities. I'm like, well, what do they do with them? They don't tell us.
Really?
Real smoke and mirrors. It's real weird. I started investigating further. I went up in a small airplane with Representative Tom Tiffany, one of our members of Congress in the United States. He and I had a very long conversation because he's been trying to get to the bottom of it. And I'm asking him, well, what's really going on? He says, basically, turns out there's an agreement. There's an international agreement that has been facilitating mass illegal immigration. And a lot of it's done through an agreement with the United Nations.
Right.
Interestingly, what I found was the same agreement that is facilitating mass migration into the United States is the same one the UK is part of, the same one Germany is part of, the same one Canada is part of. This was signed towards the end of the Obama administration, so before Donald Trump took office back in 2016. The United States pulled out of it, and during that time, that's why you had those migrant caravans heading up to the U.S. Trump was trying to stop it. It was a big battle, but that was also when you had the boats coming into Europe, and you had, of course, a lot of the other mass migration. I mean, it was a little different for Europe because you had the Syrian civil war, and huge numbers of people seeking refugee status from that, which I understand is coming to an end now. They might be sending them back. But a lot of the facilitated efforts, the boats, the caravans as we have in the United States, a lot of it was part of this agreement.
Right.
So the second iteration I did of this investigation, where I actually went all the way down to Panama, was to find out, what is this operation? What's really going on? So as I mentioned, I went down to the Darién Gap, southern tip of Panama, and it's interesting. It's very hard to get access to some of these areas. I managed to find a couple contacts who were able to get me into these camps.
Did you have someone with you to make sure you were safe?
Nah, not really.
Wow.
I grew up all over the place. So I grew up between San Diego, New Jersey, and Costa Rica. My dad was a big surfer, so we used to have property in Costa Rica. So I grew up playing in the jungle. Like, that's backyard for me. So I wasn't worried about it. But we had bandits down there and everything too. I don't feel threatened by that stuff. It's just me as a person probably. But we went down to these. We had to go deep into the jungle for some of these areas. So they still have Indian villages there. The Embera Indians, the villages of the Embera Indians were where they made some of the big camps. And you can argue, I don't know why they chose those camps for it, but this is what I saw. So I'll tell you a few stages of it. The first camp we got into was further out, a little more towards the main roads, right? You go in there and it's a big tent city, and it's United Nations camps.
Right.
And a lot of NGOs on the periphery of a lot of non-governmental organizations just set up shop there. Huge bus service. They're loading people on buses and they're just sending them north. I was able to gain access to 3 of those camps, actually. There's about 5 total that were facilitating most of this. And what you find is a lot of United Nations officials who will not talk to you. And I was able to talk to a lot of the people who were illegal immigrants. Most of the ones I talked to were coming from Ecuador.
Right.
And I understand where they're coming from. What they told me is they have about 5 gangs in their countries that are making it almost impossible to live. they're terrorizing people, just absolutely terrorizing people. I can tell you personally, nobody I talked to did I get the sense was a bad person.
Right.
I mean, I can empathize with them. I understand where they're coming from. I talked to a lot of people from Venezuela also. Venezuela used to be one of the top rising economies in the world. Boom, socialist policies just wrecks their economy. And for a lot of people, they saw what was, pretty good quality of life just take a nosedive.
Yeah.
And life has become very hard for them too.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot of these types of people, right? I tried to show both sides in my reporting. So I showed what these people are dealing with, and I tried to show that as accurately as possible. But you also find some people, and they're very openly part of really bad gangs. Some of them, Tren de Aragua, you talk to guys, they have signature tattoos, like they have an AK-47 tattooed on their face and stuff. Signature tattoos you find with some of the gangs. And those guys are a lot different, of course. They're proud that, they weren't hostile towards me or anything like that, but you know what they're doing. You go further out and you go into the actual checkpoints. So one of the areas we gained access to was an Embera Indian village just on the mouth of the Darién Gap. The Embera Indians, they traverse everything on these canoes, and these days they have motors, so they're pretty quick. But they're just running operations. I went on one, I rode down river on one, and so you go down. People coming out of the Darién Gap, the Embera Indians run the operations where they pick them up and they bring them to the village. There, what do you see? I walk in, there's just a big line in a big United Nations tent, and they're just checking people in. What I found is they're registering them for a program. It's part of what's called the Global Compact for Migration. It's like the Global Compact for Safe and Orderly Migration, effectively. If you go back to the Obama administration when they first created this international agreement, the nature of how they framed it was they believed that there would be a mass human rights crisis, and they said it would be a global warming crisis, and you'd have climate refugees. They estimated a huge number of refugees, and so the way they justified this is they said we need to establish systems to facilitate the safe and orderly mass migration of people fleeing the effects of climate change.
Right.
And that's what it was. So what happens is America, I don't know, I assume the UK as well, they pay in, they're part of this agreement. They call it a compact, not a treaty, because in the United States, if we join a treaty, you need a 2/3 vote by Congress. Right. So they get past that by just calling it something else. They don't call it a treaty; they call it an international agreement or something like that. So this is a compact, a global compact. They fund the United Nations. The United Nations then uses the funds partly for its own operations, but they give the money to the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations. And what happens is this. They register them with this program, and then they load them up on buses, and they send them north. They'll give them, they're basically debit cards, like prepaid credit cards. Mm-hmm. They have another name for them, and so if you say, well, they're giving them debit cards, they'll be like, that's fake information. They're technically not debit cards, right. but they're basically cash cards. Like that's not disputed. It's just the name of what you call them is where they'll say you're spreading false information.
It's an ongoing theme here, naming something slightly different.
I don't know why they're just not more transparent with it. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. So anyways, what happens is this. They load them up they check them in with the United Nations, register them, they load them up on buses. They have all kinds of programs, food, housing, money, keep them going effectively. They load them up on buses, they send them to the other camps, they process them further, and they send them north. So from Panama, of course, they drop them off at the border of Nicaragua. Nicaragua picks them up, or Costa Rica. Costa Rica picks them up, sends them north. They go to Nicaragua. Nicaragua is actually not part of the Global Compact for Migration, and so it's actually human trafficking organizations. It's actual human traffickers and gangs that do the transport. but they're part of it, and so they load them up on buses there. They send them north. Eventually, of course, Mexico, and they bring them north. Eventually, they get out of the buses and they walk, and that's when you see the press pictures of these migrant caravans and so on. When they reach the U.S.-Mexico border, and this is different now with Trump, but at the time this is what was happening. When they reach the U.S.-Mexico border, it's crazy. So I went to Mexico to see this for myself. When you go to the Mexico side of the Rio Grande, you look at the ground, it's covered with discarded IDs. Driver's licenses, passports, bus tickets, airplane tickets.
Real passports.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating, covering the ground.
Wow.
There's not that, I'd say 3 inches. I guess you guys use centimeters. We'll use anything other than the metric system in the United States. You know what I mean? But covering the ground everywhere. And they have burn pits, and on the sides of the burn pits, you'll see half-burned ones. There's folders that have United Nations documents and so on with government of Mexico stuff. I mean, I have it all on camera, of course. The reason they discard their identities is because America has programs where we allow migration from certain countries, right? So we had temporary protection status. And so a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll falsify which country they're coming from.
Right.
Or, for example, maybe the person's from Haiti originally, but they've been living in like Chile. But, so for example, I found there were a lot of IDs from Chile. They're not deemed an unsafe country. And so what would happen is people would discard their identities that would hide the fact that they were residents of Chile.
Right.
And then they could say, well, I'm from Haiti. Come across, and this is what happens. So when I was on the Mexico side, you watch people, they just get in the water, they walk across. On the other side, there's, at the time, National Guard and Customs Border Protection. They help them out of the water, and they check them in. They don't send them back. So all they had to do is go across and say, I'm here to seek amnesty. And from there is where it gets interesting. So I had a few different sources who were able to get me access to these things as well. One of my sources was one of the union leaders for Border Patrol. And so he has a little more autonomy than Border Patrol would. Active Border Patrol agent, but he wears 2 hats. And so he was able to get me to areas you can't normally get to. This is what happens after they bring them into the United States. They take them to what are called processing facilities. Processing, right? These were run by Department of Homeland Security in conjunction with Border Patrol, Customs Border Protection. And they bring them to these little tent cities and they register them. They sign them up for amnesty, getting in line effectively, or a temporary protection status. And as part of that, they also gave them parole, something that was not done before. This was many conservatives argued this was a manipulation of that law, in fact, the parole laws, because what it does is normally illegal immigrants are not eligible for social benefits. This made them eligible for it. So they can get unemployment, free housing, free food, and everything else, which then justified, you've probably heard about the hotels in New York, 4 or 5 star hotels they're putting them up in. In fact, not too far from where we're at right now, the Roosevelt Hotel, that was one of the big ones.
We have them in Britain as well.
You have them in Britain. Okay, so you're familiar with them. That was what justified that. So they could get all these programs to support them, taxpayer-funded programs. And then after that, they load them up on white buses and they drop them off. And they get out of the buses and they have their DHS Department of Homeland Security clearance documents. They've been, they do biometric. They're not undocumented, which is the way a lot of people, they say they're undocumented migrants. They're documented. They process them. And they come out with documents. And then they give them a free airplane ticket to anywhere they want to go in the country. Really? So they come out like that. So for that part of my investigation, I met up with the mayor of one of our towns here. It was Chula Vista, and I met with the mayor, and he takes me to one of these drop-off locations, and we watch it. You have these white buses roll up, and they just drop off a bunch of people in his district, and they got to find their way to the hotels, and then you have really sketchy, private car drivers. They're not government run. They're just random people, and they're human traffickers basically,
Right.
and they pick them up and take them. And I can tell you, I was talking to some of those people. Some of them were really sketchy. It made me actually concerned that some of them might be, getting shipped off to like slave labor or something.
Really?
Some of the Chinese ones in particular.
Yeah.
There were some really sketchy people I ran into on that side of it. But I was talking to the mayor of Chula Vista, and he was saying like, I asked him, well, what's happening? What are the NGOs running this? And he's like, they don't tell me. And I'm like, you're the mayor, they don't tell you? He's like, no, they don't tell me.
Really?
And I'm like, well, where do they take him to? He goes, they don't tell me. Who are the groups running this? They don't tell me. All he's told is deal with it, basically. And he brought up the point. He's like, look, fine and dandy, doing this, but why all the smoke and mirrors? Why the cloak and dagger? Why are they being so secretive about it? And that was a common theme I just saw over and over again. Nobody really knew what was going on. And so what was really going on was, what I uncovered. I did manage to get some of the NGOs to tell me who they were.
Really?
Because I'm there and I don't know, I probably look like a refugee, if I'm not dressed up, I look racially ambiguous,
You didn't have your tie on.
Yeah, I didn't have my tie on, so they just think I'm a migrant, you know what I mean? So I just roll with it. And so, they'll tell me, and then I'm like, oh, I'm a journalist, can I ask you this? Then they get real defensive. They're like, oh, you don't record me, and so on. But anyway, I was able to confirm the whole thing. And when you break it all down, this is it's a facilitated program. Your tax dollars pay for it. In the United States, the operations used to be run between the State Department would coordinate it with the United Nations. The liaison office for it was actually out in New York. And the crazy thing is, the United Nations doesn't hide it. Like, for some reason, the government's real secretive about it. With the United Nations, they're not. They even have public reporting where they're even transparent about how much they get paid and everything else. If you try to talk to them about it, they're real cautious. Because when I was in Panama, too, I actually went to one of the big United Nations complexes, and I was knocking on doors, and people would not talk to me.
Wouldn't let you in.
No, they got mad. They and I don't know why. It's like, if you're confident in what you're doing, why would you care?
Yeah, just be open.
Yeah, and that's what was weird to me. It's like, just tell me what you're doing. Come on. Anyways, so my research on the migrant crisis, as people call it, basically revealed that it's an agreement. It's a facilitated, planned, funded agreement, and your tax dollars are being used for it.
Incredible the lengths you've gone to uncover the truth on this. It's hard to imagine how it would otherwise get exposed, really.
It's how I think as a journalist. Frankly, I don't know why other media just haven't reported it also. A lot of people, they get caught up in the surface image of things, or they get caught up in the narratives. And unfortunately, I think even in the United States, I know you have to deal with in the UK, people get caught up in the racial divides and who are these people and so on. Like, in all honesty, the people I talked to were good people. I guess you call them migrants. They were all good people, and I can understand where they're coming from. When I was on the San Diego side of the Mexico border, because I also went to some other area. I went to many different points. I remember it was with the Border Patrol Union guy.
Yeah.
We were driving up one of the mountains, and you just have group after group coming through. At that time, it was mostly Chinese. You had groups of Chinese coming through. For the most, it was mostly Chinese. I'd say maybe 4/5 of them were Chinese. And I remember we met this girl. She's waving her arm. She flags us down, and she's like, "Please help me. I'm starving. I don't have water. Can you please give us a?" She spoke Chinese, but we luckily had some with us who spoke Chinese. And she's crying and stuff. And I mean, the girl was probably like, I don't know, like 17 years old. And she's like, I don't know. She goes, I don't know why people are driving by. Why won't they help me? And we had to tell her it's because if we were to let her in the car, we could be convicted for human trafficking.
Right,
so we can't.
Yeah.
you know, we gave her a bottle of water, some food, and she broke down crying and, you know, was bowing to us and stuff, saying thank you. You know, you see stuff like that. And then you ask her what happened. She said that her parents made her, you know, take the whole migrant trail. And she didn't want to do it. Her parents made her do it. And, you know, it's a very hard journey. I can only imagine what she went through. It is known in the United States that a lot of, especially the ones coming up and have to deal with the cartels, they get raped. I mean, the majority of them will be raped multiple times. And the type of abuse they face. I mean, I can tell you some other stories. When I was in the migrant camps in Panama, I remember I was talking to, oh man, horrible stories. Okay, so I came across a father, and he was holding, you know, one of his daughters, and his daughter is, you know, she's mentally disabled, right? And he's crying, you know, he's holding his daughter, and you know, he asks us for some money, and you know, we're not really giving money out. It gets complicated as soon as you do that. One of the guys we were with gave him $20, you know, because it was just so sad, right? And the guy just breaks down crying because, you know, even at the camps you had to buy food. I got some food at the camps myself, you know. Yeah, you know, because the Embera Indians, they'll cook for him and stuff like that. They have like little shops set up. So, you know, he just broke down crying. After that, a few of the other people came up and started getting mad at us and like, why did you give him money? It was one woman, and she was limping, and she goes, that man abandoned his daughter on the trail to die, left her to die. And this is what happened. So there's rivers you have to go through in the Darién Gap. And I mean, look, it's not easy. A lot of people die there. Their dead bodies just, you know, I have friends who go through it all. They just it's horrible. It's horrible. And I mean, I'll get into some of the other stuff happening there too, but so what happened with his father is he had 3 daughters with him, and he could only carry 2 of them. Wow. And so he had to choose the one he left, and so,
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, so he can only carry 2. So, you know, he left his handicapped daughter, and luckily, some of the other people coming across, in fact, the lady who got mad at us, she rescued that girl and carried her across and brought her out. And so the father, holding his daughter, crying, you know, he was in grief. He was crying over that. Another case, one of my good friends, Oscar Ramirez, he's a Mexican journalist. He goes through there pretty often, and you know, he was showing me some videos he had, because he was there with Cinefront, which is like, it's like the Panamanian military/police, right. And they try, you know, they're doing their best to deal with it too. For Panama and the government there, I talked to one of the heads of Cinefront actually. He said they feel that he said their sovereignty is being undermined by the NGOs that are running these operations because they're more powerful than the government there. Yeah. And you know, and they're battling with them for who runs these operations. Cinefront wants to have the security because one of the problems you have is you have cartels and you have bandits. Unfortunately, one of the problems you have is there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money coming through. And, you know, the migrants, when they come through, they have to pay, right? They have to pay these people, so they come with money. Yeah. And so when they're going through the Darién Gap, people rob them, people kill them. There's other terrible crimes. So one of the things that they encountered, so my good friend Oscar Ramirez, they were on the trail, he was with Cinefront, they come across 2 gang members. These guys were with one of the South American gangs. And, you know, because the Darién Gap on the other side is like Colombia, right? So you had the Colombian cartel is real active in that area. These Colombian cartel members, they caught them in the act of raping a young woman. They tell them to stop. One of the guys gets up, starts shooting at Cinefront. Cinefront returns fire. They get in a shootout. They kill one of them. In the crossfire, a woman gets hit by a bullet, and you know they have to life flight her out of there. You know, and that's the stuff they deal with. They arrested the other guy. Wow. But that's the kind of stuff they deal with. When I was in that camp, I was talking to some people, and I came across some really grieving people. And a woman told me that her husband had just been killed. So apparently what happened, they came across, again, a group of bandits. They were raping a young girl, and he tried stopping them, and they stoned him to death. Really? In front of her. And so, you know, that was the kind of stuff that they're dealing with. And I remember I was trying to talk to another group, and this young girl, and they're like, oh, she can't talk, she's traumatized. I mean, you know, like a little girl, you know what I mean? So, you know, they raped her, little girl, you know? So, I mean, I can understand both sides. I know where people are coming from.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the challenge with the United States, though, is, you know, of course, in the United States, we're having problems, too, now with gangs. Because you got to think, if you have a guy, and what's he been doing? He's been part of a cartel his whole life. He's been with, you know, Tren de Aragua or MS-13 or other things like that, and, you know, they're arresting them en masse now in, like, El Salvador. If they want to not get arrested and go to prison there, they have to flee the country. And so those guys were coming up, too. And what has happened in the United States is those people in bed with those communities, and, you know, you have people who don't have jobs, they can't get jobs, they don't have money, and then they get offered, hey, how'd you like to make some money today? And so, you know, they get human trafficked, they get into the drug business, they get into robberies. In New York, you have laws on, you know, youth crime. And so what was happening, basically it's not treated as a real serious crime if they're like under 18.
Yeah, we have the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, so in New York, you were having at Tren de Aragua, they were hiring like 14, 15-year-olds, and they're robbing people at gunpoint in Times Square. Because the kids, when they get caught, it's not really much of a punishment. There's not much repercussion for it. And so, you know, people are taking advantage of it. And so for Americans on our side, you know, you deal with that. And people are saying the problems you have in these countries, they're coming here. So, you know, it's a rough issue. Like, what do you do with it, right? I think Trump's solution now is that they're going to deport most of them. And the argument on that side is it caused too many problems. It just caused too many problems. There's not a lot of gratitude for it. So with some people, there definitely is, but it's you know, it's destabilizing our country. Yeah. And so, you know, but it's always the challenge. Like, you know, you want to help people, right? Like, you don't want people dealing with that stuff. And so what does a good person do? How do you? Is the kindest thing to let them into your country? Is it to try to do nation building? You know, America's tried doing that a lot, and it hasn't always worked out well for us either. Do you give them money, and then if you do that, then what stops the gangs from taking it, which happens? It's such a difficult issue, and I don't think anybody has a solution to it, frankly.
Join us next time when Joshua Philipp talks about his ongoing investigation into Chinese subversion of the United States.
Back in 2008, I accidentally uncovered one of the largest Chinese spy networks in the United States, tied in with the Chinese mafia. And I mean, it was rough. They were threatening, to my face, they were threatening to kill me for about 5 years.